With the release of Superman, I've seen a lot of conversation online of whether or not Robert Pattinson's Batman should fold into the mainline DCU and be their Batman. And I have a few thoughts on this. I've seen a lot more people saying that they're actually for it, and I've seen like a lot of edits and stuff like that kind of give me an idea that with the release of Superman, people are actually more interested in seeing this version of Batman be the main Batman, which is pretty surprising to me, but I'm all for it. Now, while there is a DCU Batman movie slated to release, Batman the Brave and the Bold, I do think that there's still a possibility that Robert Pattinson could be the main Batman for the DCU. Whether that means that movie gets canceled or changed into a kind of different thing to fit that, who knows? And I already see the comments, Carter, you are delusional. You're like every Robert Pattinson fan, you are delusional. James Gunn has the plan. He's not going to do it. He said he's not going to do it. But honestly, and maybe I am delusional, but look at the most recent thing James Gunn said about Robert Pattinson joining. He was asked and he said, everything's in flux. That's not what's happening right now, and we'll see what we do next. That leaves the door open to me, and that gives me the idea that there's still conversations happening. Maybe I'm just praying to the DC gods, but who knows? Now, I wanted to talk today about whether or not I think it is a good idea and why it would work or wouldn't work. To give you the answer right off the bat, do I think that James Gunn and Matt Reeves should do it? The answer is, yeah, probably. Why not? Now, the first thing I want to talk about is an argument that I see online quite a lot, and that's when you see conversations about Robert Pattinson joining, I'm sure you see the comments. His Batman is way too realistic for the DCU. It just wouldn't make any sense. There are no metahumans in the Batman movie. Why aren't they mentioned? And to that, I feel like you can kind of look at the comics and kind of make some comparisons of how they could handle it. I mean, looking at the comics, with the character of Batman specifically, he has a wide range of stories. Obviously, we've got our peak prime Batman who is dealing with all this world-ending stuff, going to multiverses, whatever it may be. But then you also have your early years Batman who is dealing with just mobsters and things like that. I mean, to me, I think of stories like Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Year One, which are a bit more grounded and a bit more focused on the detective aspect of the character. And then when I think of fantastical stories, I think about, whenever he teams up with Superman and they're fighting crazy superpowered villains or going to Apocalypse or going to other universes. And then I think about when he was a caveman. That was weird. I think it's the main things that fans are hung up on of whether or not it would work or not. And I just think that contrast is actually better than worse for this. When you look at the stuff James Gunn has said about his universe, he's stated that he wants to make every project feel very unique and individual to that character. And I think that you can see that in full display with comparing Superman to the Batman, if they choose to do it. Superman's tone is very comic booky, a bit more like Silver Age, more lighthearted, whereas the Batman is very serious and gritty, and it's a very grounded story, which I think suits the early year Batman that we are watching. Now, talking about the grounded tone, I do think that Matt Reeves' trilogy will stay pretty grounded, but I don't really think it has to stay that way. I think that there's still room to introduce some more comic booky elements, or even just, tweak the character a bit when he crosses over with characters like Superman and whatnot. Again, looking at the comics, that can happen where in one issue, it's super serious. He's trying to find a criminal who's on the loose or stop the mob or something like that. And then the next story he's in the same timeline, he's with the Justice League fighting a giant starfish. Both things can exist at the same time. Both things can be true. That's what I'm saying. But now that we're getting a bit into it, I want to move on to talk about another thing that I think could work or couldn't work with Robert Pattinson joining. And that would be with a DCU Batman film planned, The Brave and the Bold, meant to have Batman teaming up with Damian Wayne Robin. This gives fans the idea that we would already have characters like Nightwing or Red Hood possibly, or Batgirl. We could have already seen Tim become Robin, Red Robin, Drake. Tim would be Tim. And while I really want to see Nightwing as soon as possible, he is my favorite DC character. He's a lot of people's favorite DC character for a reason. With him being such a fan favorite, it would be more interesting to see the character of Dick Grayson develop into Nightwing over the course of a few years and projects. And with rumors of Robin being in the Batman Part 2 script, which I don't know how valid they are, but I just wanted to bring it up, that gives fans the chance to see Dick Grayson become Robin Boy Wonder, leader of the Teen Titans, and eventually Nightwing. But moving on to talk about the story of the Batman and Superman. While Superman's clearly a story that has a lot of DC characters, it has a lot of history that you can see within these characters, and even that mural in the Hall of Justice with all those Golden Age heroes, you can tell that James Gunn really wanted to let you know this world has heroes. It has had heroes for the longest time, and it's just a part of life for these people. And while I understand that in the Batman, it definitely does seem and feel like he is the only vigilante, I do think that you can kind of work in the idea that maybe there are some other vigilantes there that just don't take up as much spotlight or don't have as much, mysteriousness as the Batman. I also think that if you have powers, if you can fly, you are flying out of Gotham. You are not staying in that hellhole. You are flying your ass to, Central City. You are going somewhere nice. You are not staying in Gotham. But all that to say, I think the Batman story still can fit into the DCU and doesn't need to be kind of retconned in a way that makes it feel like it can still be part of that world. Because, going back to the contrast, the fact that Gotham and Metropolis literally feel like different worlds on the same planet is so interesting. And I think that's why we love seeing those characters team up so much. But going back to the comics, Batman did start out fighting mobsters and gangsters in his early years and eventually evolved to fighting people like Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, Clayface. Trust me, I love those fantastical villains. Man-Bat is my favorite underrated Batman villain. The vibe of him is so sick. But while I do think that Matt Reeves isn't going to incorporate those more fantastical villains, I think that kind of works in the way that his trilogy is a starting point for this version of Batman where, he's slowly uncovering that the world is a lot more corrupt than he knows. And it seems like he might be setting up the Court of Owls, which, on the surface seems grounded, a secret society, whatever, but I'm pretty sure they literally worship a bat demon. So take that as you will. But all that to say, I do think that after Matt Reeves' trilogy, if Robert Pattinson still wanted to stay on, other creatives could kind of get him from that spot to become a more fantastical Batman that more easily interacts with the rest of the DCU. I do also think that people kind of exaggerate how grounded Matt Reeves' Batman movie is because while, Batman's more underpowered than we're used to seeing and the Riddler maybe was turned into a more realistic like serial killer type of character, I don't think that means that it's more grounded. I think the aesthetics of Gotham are way more gothic than we get to see in, the Nolan trilogy. Just look at what Bruce Wayne's penthouse looks like in the movie. Like, that is not a real place. No one lives in a place like that. But yeah, that's an opinion I see a lot. Even of fans of the Batman, they are fans of it being grounded, which to me, I'm more of a fan of the aesthetics of the gothicness of everything. And even their Times Square seems, larger than life and a bit exaggerated. I do think that there's definitely room to grow into more fantastical aspects with Matt Reeves' world. An alternative of this would be to have Robert Pattinson's Batman be almost a prequel to the DCU Batman. I don't know how much I love that idea. I've seen it floated around, but I feel like that can cause more issues than good because then you're going to have creatives working on the DCU Batman having to make sure that they're not stepping on Matt Reeves' toes with anything that they're doing. And I think those constraints would honestly harm that version of the character more than just having two versions going at the same time. But talking about the tone and the story, at the end of the day, it's Warner Brothers. They don't care about that stuff. There's one thing they care about, and that is, at the end of the day, while the DCU seems like a very passionate project from creatives like James Gunn and whoever ends up working on those movies, it is still a Warner Brothers studio, and they want to make money. That's really all they want to do. And I do think that they probably have some hesitations to having two Batman movies running at the same time. And I can kind of see that, I think that having a DCU Batman and a Robert Pattinson Batman trilogy going at the same time could cause some cannibalization of sales because then you're going to have fans of the Robert Pattinson Batman ignore the DCU because they don't want to see another characterization of Bruce. Or you're going to have people who really, really want a more fantastical Batman ignore the Robert Pattinson movies and only watch the DCU. Now, to keep it a buck, you and I, we're watching both. We're fans of Batman. You know, call me DC Publishing because I will take all the Batman stuff I can get, okay? But I'm talking more about general audiences, which at the end of the day is what makes the money. Fans are niche and general audiences are wide, they're general. I do get the idea that maybe Warner Brothers executives are pushing James Gunn to make that choice, because when he first announced the DCU and he did answer questions about Robert Pattinson, he did give a more concrete answer. You know, it was a lot more of it's up to Matt Reeves, or I feel like sometimes he maybe even said no. But now I feel like we've seen a shift and we've seen a bit more of an open possibility of that happening. Whether that's because James Gunn wants it, whether that's because he sees that more of the fans want it, or whether or not that's Warner Brothers pushing him to do that, I do think that we are closer to it being a possibility than a lot of people give credit for. I also think that Matt Reeves has quite a large say in it, because he probably doesn't want to deal with the limitations having to work within this wider universe and keeping that stuff in mind when he's writing his movies. And personally, I wouldn't want that to mess with the story he's trying to tell at all. If Robert Pattinson being a part of the DCU means that Matt Reeves doesn't have as much creative control over his trilogy, then personally, I would be against it. I would say Matt Reeves is creating a generational Batman. To me, the best Batman I've ever seen. It's my favorite movie of all time. To have a studio or other projects conflict with that, I think would not be worth it in the end. But at the end of the day, as much as I'm super for Robert Pattinson coming over to the DCU, and I do think the story potential is better, I also think that having two would be pretty cool. If both remain successful, I'm super interested in having two takes of the Batman, because I love the character on both sides. I love that more Silver Age blue costume, caped crusader, and I do like the detective, gritty, serious guy. And if both exist at the same time, I'd be for it. I think the only thing that I'm a bit conflicted on is the actor, because I do think that Robert Pattinson is a very skilled actor and he brought so much to the role that I don't know how I'd feel seeing another portrayal of the character. At the end of the day, as much as I'd like to not compare them, you know that we're going to be in that theater comparing. It's just going to happen. And a lot of the fan casts I've seen for DCU Batman, I don't know if I'm all for it, but that's another video I can make if you guys are interested. But at the end of the day, I think whatever decision they make, the DCU is looking super, man. But let me know what you think. Do you want Robert Pattinson to come over? Do you want Matt Reeves to, keep his creative control and not have to worry about that? Do you like the grounded take of the Batman too much? Are you in the other boat, and do you really want to see a fantastical Batman, and you really want to see a new actor don the cowl? Let me know. And if you like this video, stick around because it's a new channel, but I plan to talk about all things nerdy. Star Wars, comic book movies, comic books, and definitely video games, stuff like that. So if you're interested, maybe subscribe, and I'll see you next time. See ya.